Okay, looks good. Well, welcome back to the Azure Podcast. We're here on episode number 483, being recorded in the new year here, January 10th, 2024. We have some special guests here to talk about the Azure VMware solution today, and we'll get to them in a second here. But before that, we had some news. I don't know if you guys had anything, but I had one thing I wanted to mention here, and that's around the quantum work that we've been doing. Basically, Microsoft has just recently announced that they're working with the U.S. Department of Energy in the Pacific Northwest National Lab. That's quite a mouthful, but it's around the Azure Quantum elements being used for new battery materials and whatnot. So this is using some of the quantum work that we've talked about in a podcast before, along with, traditional things like AI and HPC techniques and whatnot. So there's been a nice kind of write-up about, what's going on there in that case, what we're working on together in that case. Very technical around the qubits and some of the quantum pieces, but it's super exciting to see that work progress, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about quantum as that progresses. I don't know if there's anything else, guys.
Yeah, Kayla had a quick one over here with the Azure Spring Apps, the Enterprise Edition. So typically you would use the pay-as-you-go model for that, and now they have like a savings plan that you could sign up for. So if you want to take it for a year or even 3 years, you can get up to 47% savings on, compared to the pay-as-you-go plan. So if you're using the Java Spring Apps feature in Azure, that's something for you to consider.
Awesome. Okay. Light on news this week, but that's okay. We'll dive right into it here with our special guests. I want to go ahead and introduce, we have two guests here today to talk about Azure VMware Solution. The first is Elena, and then also we have Sabine. So if you guys want to take a second and introduce yourselves, tell us what you do in Azure, and we can get into it.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting us. So my name's Elena Krasteva. I am a cloud solution architect who's based in our customer success organization. I'm based out of the United Kingdom. So I look after a set of customers and help them on their cloud adoption journey. And my specialism is around Azure infrastructure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sabine Blair. Hopefully everybody can hear me. If you can't see me, I have my headset on for functional purposes and not only fashion purposes. But I am also a cloud solution architect, senior cloud solution architect out of the customer success unit based in the Americas. And we're a global team, and we focus on Azure infrastructure primarily. And one of my specialties is also the Azure VMware Solution. So about 70% of the customers that I work with are using that to do their data center migrations. We'll get more into what the tool does, but that's my day-to-day.
That's awesome. So I don't know who wants to start here, but maybe you could give us an overview of when we're talking about things and when people hear about Azure VMware Solution, what does that mean? Like, what's that made up of? Why should they care about that? Maybe we could start with that and kind of dive in here.
And so if you want the functional answer or the comical answer.
I like the let's start with the comedy one. It's a new year. We'll start on a happy, funny place.
Yeah, sure. So, data center migrations, they can be a headache. I know because I've been doing them since like 2010. And no matter where I go, they always come back because we're always going to be finding ways to migrate and adopt to the cloud from the cloud. And what the Azure VMware solution does is it makes that significantly easier. So prior to having VMware solutions in the cloud and doing your data center transformation, it used to be a really, really big effort. Simple things such as, can I bring my Windows servers over into the cloud. It's like, well, do you have software assurance? Can you map your cores? And next thing you know, what you're doing, Tetris and combinations and permutations with CPU and memory, just trying to get it into the cloud. So what the Azure VMware solution does is, instead of just having an Azure hypervisor on Azure bare metal infrastructure, you now can bring the VMware hypervisor into Azure. And that's going to allow you now to basically keep your skill sets like for like, because you're using all the tools that you're used to, like vCenter and NSXT now, but in Azure. So it helps to make your migration path a little bit more direct.
Sorry, go ahead, Sujit. I didn't use my hand, and so we stepped on each other. We're out of practice. The first show of the new year. Sabine, is the target audience for this? I know we're talking a little bit about the VMware solution, sort of by itself first before we get into the landing zone. But like, this is targeted at people that are used to using VMware on premises, right? Like if I'm a Hyper-V on premise, this person, I'm not necessarily gonna be leveraging these capabilities, right?
Yeah, that's the primary targeted audience. If you're using VMware today on-prem, then you can go ahead and use VMware today in the cloud and kind of have it be pretty like for like.
Okay.
And just to clarify what you said, Sabine, so the solution offers VMware on bare metal in Azure, or on like a VM in Azure. What is the offering here?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe I could cover that. Yeah, you're exactly right. So it's a VMware software-defined data center stack, as they call it, or that includes everything: the VMware hypervisor, their software-defined storage product. It includes their vCenter for management orchestration, etc. So it's all deployed on bare metal hosts. So there's no nested virtualization going on or anything like that, which means that customers can bring their workloads and have the expected performance and management that they would have had on-prem. It's a very seamless transition from both purely technical standpoint and also operational standpoint, as Sabine mentioned.
What about in terms of licensing you mentioned there with VMware? So if they already have existing VMware licenses and things like that they're using, is there anything special there with Azure, or it's like, no, you just kind of add additional things, or do they just spin up this thing in Azure and then they're paying Azure to do this piece?
I mean, yeah, they just spin this up in Azure, so you don't. Everything's included in that solution. So think about the host, the Azure VMware Solution hosts, as effectively hyper-converged environment, but in the cloud. And then that also includes all of the licenses for all of the VMware software products, including some of the VMware products that they can use for migration. So there are benefits. There are some commercial benefits there in terms of enabling customers to bring their Windows and Windows and SQL servers that have software assurance, so they can realize hybrid benefits there by bringing those workloads into AVS.
Yeah, and it's definitely come along a bit too in pricing. So as soon as you choose to use the Azure VMware solution, you pretty much go in and you turn on the provider in the Azure portal, just like you would do most Azure native services. And once you give it like the IP space, it's going to go and it's going to set up all the networking. It's going to set up all the storage. It's going to have a host available. Once it's done deploying, you pretty much just log in. And there used to be some tool sets that would require an enterprise license that have now also been included. So HCX is the main tool that it uses to facilitate migrations. And so you don't have to get a separate license for that. That comes with the solution, and you get all the enterprise features. So you no longer have to get a separate license for that. The only thing that would probably have an additional license if you wanted to use a DR tool, like the site recovery manager they have. But everything else, the vCenter, the networking, it's all covered by the pricing model.
when it comes to being highly available, in this kind of new solution here, I know typically in VMs we're used to things like availability zones. There's ways that our customers are familiar with, right, to get those levels of availability. How does that work with this service? Does it use some of the native VMware features for availability, or does it leverage something in Azure to gain additional availability in the cloud? Because I think the common theme that's come up before, which is the cloud, things are going to break in the cloud. You know that, right? Because it's typically commodity hardware, and it may not be that the gold standard hardware that customers are used to having on their data center. It's more commoditized in Azure because we have millions of them that are out there in the data centers. So how does availability work in the solution?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when everyone comes to the cloud, that's one of the big selling points of the cloud, right? Multiple AZs. And the key thing to remember about the Azure VMware solution is that it's not necessarily a workload like a single Azure VM. It is a data center. Similar to how you have a data center on-prem, you're going to have a data center on Azure managed bare metal. So with that said, DR in that sense is treated in a very similar way, where if you want to go and have multiple data centers, near zeros, things like that, what you would do is you would take advantage of the fact that AVS has wide region availability. So you can pin AVS in specific regions, what we like to call hero regions. So for example, if you're in East US and pairing it with West US, and then be able to pair those together. The nice thing about the Azure VMware solution is that it comes with an express route. So that's not something that you even pay for secondary. An express route is going to be your circuit, your avenue into everything that you're going to do in the Azure VMware solution. And they make it so simple to pair those circuits together so that you have connectivity between them. And there's other features there as well for high availability, but it's a key thing to think about that is really at the platform level. And then in the application level itself, there are things that you could do, such as placement groups and segmentation within the software-defined data center, taking advantage of some things that VMware can do, naturally, like vhosting and shifting things around. So there's a lot of options there as well. It's not the same as a traditional virtual machine that you're pinning to AZs. You're really having to think about it from the holistic platform, which could be thousands of servers and terabytes of data, but giving you more flexibility than you would have on-prem because you're using the Azure backbone.
And it sounds like there's a ton of complexity to how to set this up and sort of make sure I have the right network configuration, make sure I have my VMs configured right. Is that where the landing zone piece comes in? Is to help me sort of build that framework to make sure I'm doing it right? Like, how do I make sure I don't totally screw this up and then I flip the switch and all of a sudden nothing runs when I'm running it in Azure and it ran just fine on premises?
Now I feel bad. I didn't mean to make it sound complicated. That's probably why I'm not in sales.
Not really. I mean, in terms of provisioning, it's actually quite straightforward, right? The load of it is a lot of it is automated. In fact, all of it is automated because at the end of the day, it's an Azure service, right? So it lives in a subscription, it lives in a resource group. You could.
So all my Azure knowledge is sort of transferable.
It is transferable.
Okay.
It's bringing best of both worlds, really. And we do have the Landing Zone accelerators that realistically, they're kind of ready-made templates for customers. So infrastructure as code templates, or even through click-through portal experience, that ensure that when you deploy that Azure VMware infrastructure, you're deploying it in the best possible way, following best practices, just like we would with any other landing zone, right? And yes, there are things to consider there besides just they're the key design principles to consider, right, in terms of access, security, where we are going to deploy and how, etc. But realistically, what those accelerators do is really help customers make sure that they have the right sort of plumbing in place, so that when they start scaling, they don't hit any issues. and
Okay, so
simplifying
it's
that
really
process.
it's adding that additional layer on top. It's not sort of my basic. The basic pieces are pretty straightforward, pretty easy. The landing zone is to make sure that my network security is right, and my access management is right, and my UDRs are right, and those kind of things. Which to be honest are the most complicated parts, right, of any deployment. Okay, that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
with that as well. It's like exactly what Elena said. The spinning up an SDDC, once you click the button and you come back to it, it's done. You grab your lunch, something. But where the Landing Zone Accelerator expounds upon that, it's exactly what you said. It's everything else. It's like, okay, well, I need to access the vCenter. Where should my domain controllers be? Can I leave them
Right.
on-prem? Like, no, hey, our recommendation, and you can see this from our accelerator code, is, spin up some servers, make sure that it's closed, create the connectivity to it, make it highly available. It's all those external things that you're going to do in your day-to-day. There are many cases where you land in AVS and you stay there. But then there are also the cases where, hey, at some point I'm trying to transition to Azure Native as well. Like I have, Azure NetApp files. I want to use an NFS solution. There's so many Azure services that I can now explore. And, you get that agility. It kind of takes a weight off of your shoulders, because if you did have the AVS solution, you were trying to move that over. It's like, okay, I got to learn about the compute terms, and I got to learn about the networking terms and security group. But when you come into AVS, it's like, oh, I know it's a segment. I know it's a VLAN. I know, these terminologies that I use on-prem. And then piece by piece, you can start integrating with those Azure native services. So we like to come in most scenarios that we see customers doing and using, or people using in general when they use the Azure VMware solution. We try to cover those in a Landing Zone Accelerator so you could accelerate your landing zone.
So that's nice. So that means that you've kind of abstracted away some of the underlying Azure specific components and put standard VMware components on top of them so that it's familiar to customers that are migrating over. Now, Sabine, you mentioned Express Route briefly earlier on. I want to clarify. So the Express Route, is that used to connect the on-premises or the customer's location back into VMware? Is that what it's primarily used for?
Yeah, it has a few use cases. That's one of them. So that's the first and foremost thing. Like, well, if I want to just connect to it, I'm going to need a connectivity. So that's why the solution, it comes with the Express Route circuit so that you can connect it back to on-prem, but also connect it to an Express Route gateway in Azure. And realistically, it could be done peered with any circuit with global reach. That's, getting a little bit more into the weeds, but as long as there's a circuit from some provider present, then you can peer to it. So normally when you're on-prem, you have to go through like a provider, like a Megaport or AT&T or something, and you'd have to purchase it, and then you have to pay for their rates. The one that comes with the Azure VMware solution is not rate limited because it's coming from Microsoft. So it's not something that you pay for. Again, you click the button, you go get your lunch, you come back, it's there and ready for you to use and consume.
And once I deploy these resources, I know you talked about using Express Route to connect different vCenter deployments, in different regions, to have my data centers. Can I also, it sounds like I can connect through Express Route, I can connect to other Azure virtual networks, but are my VMs going to be in the same VNet as Azure VMs, or at the end of the day, I end up doing some VNet to VNet connectivity to make, like, can I sort of interchange my Azure native stuff with my VMware stuff, or is there some challenges around trying to make those two things play nice together?
They do play very nice together.
Good.
So I think it's important to mention that Azure VMware Solution does not live in a VNet, right? So
Okay.
that dual purpose, yeah. So all of the virtual machines that run on that VMware infrastructure will run on that VMware cluster or software-defined data center, right? But there is, of course, connectivity into, you can connect into an Azure a virtual network, and then effectively just plug that into the rest of your Azure networking to then communicate with whatever other services you need.
So it acts sort of like another virtual network that I'm connecting to, even if it's not in, it's not in my Azure VNet, but I can still connect between my resources in my Azure VNet with my VMware deployment at that point.
Yeah, that's why it has that. That's why it has that Microsoft Edge. Effectively, that's why it has that Express Route connection, right? So then we can surface it up to a VNet with an Express Route gateway, and from then it is exactly like you would normally use an Express Route connection. So this is how then that opens some really powerful use cases when customers have migrated. Now they might want to start think about modernization, and one of the easiest ways to do that is to start augmenting your existing workloads with Azure services that can or even completely refactor, right? You're already there. You're already testing your cloud processes and workloads and everything else. So it makes it a lot easier to then transform into the desired modernized state.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, one question I wanted to ask, because you folks have done this, quite actively, it sounds like, and I guess the question is, what should our listeners think about if they're like starting to approach this in terms of like planning? I know there's like the landing zones and the accelerators and things like that, but like from a subscription standpoint, like is there like a kind of checklist, if you will, that they kind of go through that like here's how you get started? Obviously that changes based on the size of workloads that they're moving and the complexity and things. But I just wondered in general, like, how do people get started with this, kind of thing?
That is a very good question. And we actually do have a good sort of prerequisite checklist and a whole sort of getting started checklist there as well. But it's really very simple. Like just to deploy that service in Azure, all you need to know is what region you're going to deploy in. Choose a region of your choice. In fact, I think Azure VMware Solutions is available across most, if not all, Azure regions. Choose the type of a host that you might need. Now, there'll be availability depending on which kind of host which host size you choose, because it obviously comes in various different sizes. Remember, we said it's a hyper-converged model, so you have your compute, storage, and networking all in one place. We do have different size hosts, but once those are realistically, and we can help customers, of course, along that journey. But choose the region you want to deploy. You've got you need to have a subscription, of course, because it is an Azure resource. Resource group name. Decide upon a couple of things. Most important one would be the IP address space that will be used in order to provision that environment, that service, and you're good to go. That's really the bare minimum. Of course, with a migration, there is some planning to come in place as well.
Yeah, I was about to ask about that. So I guess the next steps then is to copy all the files or the data from on-premises to your new service that you deployed in Azure, and then repoint all the users to that new service. Is that kind of the next steps there?
If the intent is migration, yes, that's right. So I think data center migrations are probably, I would say, our biggest use case, Sabine. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so there are a variety of use cases that customers may need Azure VMware Solution for. So that's anything from an entire data center migration to a region expansion to maybe mergers and acquisitions. So if you need that extra piece of capacity or expanding another geographical location, disaster recovery in some cases. But yeah, if the most common intent is that quick migration to the cloud, and in which case that's right, and we have the right tools and IP to support customers through a successful migration.
Yeah, and migration, just moving data from one place to another. Anyone that knows VMware knows that that's something that they do very, very well. They have superior products when it comes to that. One of them being HCX. You can do your migrations in bulk. You can do them in waves. You can do them online and live. You can stretch your networks. So there's a lot of different options to bring those workloads from on-prem over into the AVS cloud with minimal downtime.
Another question I had is around like security or like the identities of the things that are involved here, like with your existing maybe on-premises things and then the things that exist in the cloud. What's the flexibility? What's the story there around like how to maintain proper security, but also like maybe as they're going through this migration, like they're migrating to something like Entra or something inside the cloud. How does that work? Is it pretty flexible there from like, hey, you can just keep what you were doing before in the VMware solution, or is it like, we have options for them to kind of move over to the more native things in Azure as well?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of both. Like if I had to put it into two sentences, I would say uh, don't boil the ocean and also keep your minds open. And the reason I say that is because, yes, there's a lot of services that we have available, but also realizing that one of the big bread and butters of the AVS solution is that a lot of tools that you have today, if I can name a few, like real live operations and things that they use for monitoring, you're in a data center. The tools that you use today, you can use tomorrow. Now, that sometimes brings conversations about licensing costs and things like that. Like, let's say you're using a third-party backup solution, and then you look at, something like maybe Mabs, that might be a better option for you. So you have that freedom of, hey, if even if day one you move everything and you keep it as is, because we have that connectivity now built in and so easy and seamless to turn on, you could just start experimenting with different services. And a lot of people do see that they're able to, port things over. Like instead of maybe paying for an F5 load balancer, I'm going to use an Azure load balancer. It's simple enough. It can see my VMs. I get a public access and I'm good to go. So there's a lot of different options. So you can keep things as today, but we have security frameworks and security assessments. So there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of options to have still that efficiency when you get to the cloud. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that was good. And, just maybe a high level question on the relationship with VMware, because at least I've been, at Microsoft long enough to know that, VMware is kind of being like a competitor almost with Microsoft. And as you said, even now, we've got things like NetApp, so they're competing products, which is fine, right? But how's the relationship like being with VMware? How supportive are they of this new service? If there's a problem, do they get involved? Does someone from Microsoft get involved? Like, how does that handled?
Well, I can honestly say I really enjoy working with VMware. I think we have a great relationship with them. And, the same thing with NetApp as well. We're all working to the common goal of customer success. And there hasn't been a time that, we've reached out to VMware. VMware is so integrated into a lot of our processes when it comes to like documentation and peer reviewing and making sure that we're up to date with features and things like that. It's a very, very seamless relationship. The main thing that we want to highlight for customers is that they are using an Azure product. So when they're creating support tickets, they don't have to go in and necessarily get like a VMware license to put in support. They're going to put in support with Microsoft like they would do any other Azure service. And if at any point there's something that's very, very in the weeds of like the VMware hypervisor itself, we have the resources and the relationship to still treat that as a Microsoft support ticket to get that resolved. So I don't think they see any division. It's all one holistic product, one holistic team working to the best solution. And
Awesome.
My experience.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. I think, yeah, it's a true partnership.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to. Yeah, it's great. I wanted to kind of wrap up here. I mean, it's been great to kind of talk through, what this offering's about, what you guys have been working on, and I just want to throw out to the other guys if you have any other questions or if there's anything from you guys as well that you want to talk about as we wrap this up. Sajit, Evan, anything?
No, this is good. I think your question was super critical. Around this is really what we used to call it co-competitive. I forget. There was some amalgam of those co-opetition, something like that, right? Like this is a really good example of really where yes, we're competing with them, but at the end of the day, it's just about making our mutual customers' life easier. And it sounds like it's a really great path for folks that are already on and using and very happy with VMware, but they want the benefits of the infrastructure pieces, right? Nobody wants their own data center if they can help it, but they want to keep VMware, which makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned more about VMware being with Microsoft than I ever did when I actually had to manage VMware. I was just like, where's my life gone? Like all these years I've been using VMware and no one ever invited me to VM Explorer until I got to Microsoft.
That's probably a good sign. Probably a good sign.
Very cool. So yeah, I just want to get ahead and say again, thank you to Elena and Sabine for coming on and educating our
thank you.
listeners on this. And obviously, if you have any links or anything for our listeners that would help them get started, we'll put those in the show notes. And appreciate you guys coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.